for most of my 35 years here in Washington. I got here in 1990. August has always been the slowest month of the year, right? Slower even than December, right? Because December, yes, it's slow, but we've got so many obligations, right? August really is the slowest month of the year. Congress leaves town. The White House throttles back. Trust me, traffic, there's no traffic in Washington unless there's a Nats game, even right now, especially if the Nats are playing the Phillies or Mets these days. But, that's literally the only traffic you run into. And the rule of thumb about August was simple. Don't launch anything new until September, when everyone is paying attention again, when all parents are their kids back at school, et cetera. August really was always used for regrouping. Presidents took vacations. That didn't mean stuff didn't. There was a lot of important stuff would happen in August. I think I said this to you before. I actually have always done a July vacation. I've learned to do that lately more so than August, because for me, August, there is always a lot more happening in August than people realize. So August for me is about preparing for September in many ways. But it sort of made August even more interesting at times, because it was so baked in that you didn't do anything planned that you knew if something happened in August, it was unplanned, and that it was a bigger story than you realized. Bill Clinton thought he was in the clear in August of 98. Then the Monica Lewinsky grand jury testimony hit in 2005. George W. Bush thought he could vacation in Crawford. Then he had Hurricane Katrina, which turned August into a political catastrophe. But these are semi-unplanned events, right? And in some ways, you were encouraged to try to keep your head down in August. Of course, Donald Trump's never bought into that idea. For him, there is no regrouping. There is no resting. August is no different than April, than May, than December, than June, right? It's all the same. And of course, this August has been anything but sleepy. We've had two high-profile summits, a federal takeover of the D.C. Police Department, the government buying a stake in Intel, a new redistricting order in Texas, a response in California, a manufactured Epstein file. I'm sure I'm leaving a few things out. We had a lot of motion in August. But you know what we didn't have? We didn't have a lot of movement, right? Where things stood between Ukraine and Russia in July, they still stand today. The summits produced nothing, but there was a big TV show. The takeover of DC policing has been performative. Troops are deployed in all the wrong neighborhoods. South Park had it right, for what it's worth. I've been driving around town, and wherever you would think that what Donald Trump's stated goal is, he's not been. I've not seen him in parts of town that aren't tourist attractions. It's like being anchored in the ocean while the boat rocks back and forth, right? There's plenty of turbulence, but no forward direction. And at some point, that motion without movement simply makes everybody seasick. So take the redistricting fight in Texas. Trump's order was met with such resistance that it triggered a nationwide scramble. Everyone's trying to outgame the other side for partisan advantage. Democrats are justifying their actions by pointing to Republicans. Republicans point to Democrats, and the result is a complete abandonment of the democratic principle of fair representation. That's motion with real consequences, but it's the kind that corrodes institutions rather than strengthens them. And ultimately, the goal for both parties is to fight to a draw, which is motion without movement. Let's look at the Epstein file gambit. Trump managed to stage a faux revelation by saying, this is actually like, unpack what he did with Epstein here, right? If you believe there are all these files that should be released and aren't being released, you should really be angry by what he did, right? Because Trump managed to stage a faux revelation by sending his own personal lawyer to interview Ghislaine Maxwell. Of course, before the interview, they made sure to publicly dangle the possibility of clemency. So it sort of obviously had an impact on her testimony, right? Then, of course, they released the transcript that, surprise, seemed to clear Trump. Manufactured theater through and through, right? Here we had a convicted felon begging for a pardon, coached through her answers, presented to the public as if she were a credible witness. Chum in the water, created headlines, got people talking, but it advanced nothing. Motion, not movement. I am really curious to see if those that say they care about the Epstein files on the right view this Ghislaine Maxwell transcript as something that's worthless or worth something. I kind of think it's totally worthless, right? I mean, at one point in the transcript, when she says, hey, let me add something, and it's this extra, it's almost like her lawyer said, hey, you didn't clear Trump enough. You need to make sure you clear Trump more. Or let's look at the John Bolton prosecution threat. What was the point of that? Not to win a conviction. The point is to send a message. Criticize Trump, and the government will be weaponized against you. That's why Kash Patel at the FBI now makes J. Edgar Hoover look like a statesman. And that's why the sudden firing of Trump loyalist Billy Long at the IRS is extra suspicious. Because there's only one of two reasons Billy Long was fired. Either he wouldn't go far enough on something, or he was willing to go too far and Scott Bessent stepped in. Either way, something stinks to high heaven here. Let's just say I'm old enough to remember when House Republicans used to care about abuse at the IRS, and they would spend all sorts of time trying to. I mean, Jim Jordan, I think, became a household figure by going after a bureaucrat at the IRS. And here we have really suspicious activity at the IRS. I would say don't hold your breath for James Comer to start issuing subpoenas for testimony from Treasury to find out what's actually happened to the IRS, to find out what actually happened with Billy Long. Something smells, but don't count on your congressional oversight folks to actually care. And it's not confined to Washington. In Virginia, the Department of Justice has been working to elevate the transgender school issue again. It's a fight Republicans believe helps them politically, but here's the federal government being used to try to prop up a campaign in Virginia. This is what you're going to see, right? We're starting to see, right? The power of the federal government. Trump will use this power to politically try to maneuver things in his favor. And by the way, if you're wondering, like all this mortgage fraud stuff, right? This has been one of the more interesting sort of manufactured crises that they've created, which is to scour the financial disclosures of home ownership and of real estate, of selective political opponents, Letitia James, Adam Schiff. We're now seeing it with the Fed governor. And I will just tell you a basic rule of thumb. If Roger Stone, which is a longtime Trump dark arts on and off again advisor, he hypes these two things more than anything, right? Well, when Stone is involved in something, you know it's not on the up and up, right? This guy is as crooked as they come when it comes to political dark arts. He arguably invented the modern version of it in many ways. And his obsession with this tells me how manufactured that is. So still, it's part of a bigger pattern, right? Constant motion, not a lot of movement. Every day, one of these stories takes over. Every day, the boat rocks again. Trump's first term, he did the same thing, but there were people inside government who did try to steady the ship. Not anymore. Maybe there's Bessent on the economy, maybe Rubio on Ukraine. In fact, I do wonder if you didn't have Bessent on the economy, we'd probably already be in a recession with the tariff craziness. And if you didn't have Rubio there, Ukraine would already have lost its sovereignty to Russia. But outside of that, everyone else is enabling this chaos. I mean, my gosh, the FBI is not this is so deeply damaging to the reputation of the FBI, what Kash Patel is doing. I mean, what American is going to believe anything coming out of the FBI right now? It all feels, and if I were a rank and file FBI agent, I'd be just appalled. This is terrible. It's like what's happening to the poor rank and file at Border Patrol, DHS, your average National Guard. Remember, these people are following orders, and they're really, it's what Trump is doing to these folks, what's happening to these agencies. This is doing long-term damage where it's just trust will erode for everybody. But it also brings me to the economy, because this is the real danger. What happens when things get worse with this economy? And they're going to get worse, right? You've heard it from Mark Zandi. I just heard it from one of Trump's most loyal economic advisors, Steve Moore, who's certainly more bullish than most, but has some concerns about this economy. Things are getting worse. I mean, I'll just give you one. Everybody hates the airport anecdote, but I was at the airport killing some time, ordered a couple eggs, and the menu said $3.75 per egg. So I ordered 2 eggs. Waiter said, actually, we just raised them. The price changed, and it's $6 per egg now. And he went through this whole reason. He was like apologizing. He goes, you sure you want to order eggs, or do you want to just order one egg? And it was just, look, it's an anecdotal, but you're hearing it. I told you about shrinkflation already taking place at Trader Joe's. We know others of you have been, when I weighed in on that, I've been hearing from other folks on this. I mean, the cost of living has gone up. There's not a single streaming service that is deciding to charge less for entertainment. And in fact, everybody seems to be charging more, even as there's weird consolidation. Disney, Hulu, and ESPN, I thought we're all under the same umbrella, and somehow I'm going to be paying more, not less, right? We all see that coming. All of that impacts the pocketbook. All of it. So here we are. We have jobs are scarcer. The next jobs report, next couple of jobs report are going to be very, very telling. Inflation is still rising. Stagflation in the spring of 26 is a real potential problem. And what happens when that happens, right? What's the federal government? How's Trump going to try to distract from all of this? I don't know if he can, because lived experience is just that. You feel it at the grocery store. You'll feel it at the gas pump. You'll feel it when rent hikes outpace paychecks. You'll feel it when the so-called booming economy doesn't match the reality of your own household budget. Stocks may be going up in a handful of stocks that are betting on AI, but all those bets on AI are about eliminating your job. That's what's scary out there for people. So when the economy does sour in 26, Trump's going to panic. So what are we going to see? We're going to see more Boltons, probably. You know, if you're a nominee in a race that's on the edge, and you're going up against Trump, whether you're an independent, a Democrat, whatever, don't be surprised if an allegation, gets instead of a piece of Oppo research, they just use it. They have a U.S. attorney make an announcement to make it seem more real, right? I think we know that's all coming. There'll be more abuse of the IRS, more abuse of the DOJ and the FBI. There'll be a lot more distraction, retribution. All of it will be motion, but no movement. Right? No movement. And in the end, that's the Trump strategy. The boat must always be rocking. Motion for its own sake. And when you squeal, when you get seasick, he leans into it. That was true in his first term. It's more true now with no guardrails left. The question is, how much of this will the country tolerate? When the trains aren't running on time, when the rocking boat isn't going anywhere, how long before people simply want off? Well, we found out in 2020, right? This strategy made people literally sick, and they wanted out. And that's, to me, the real risk that's out there, because right now, all this motion is just leaving us adrift economically, certainly leaving us adrift politically, certainly leaving us adrift when it comes to America's place in the world. We're exhausted, we're seasick, and we're likely worse off than when we started.